Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Bovee and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Well, the scar tissue just continues to pile up.
Yeah.
I mean, what more? We can't be through anything else that we haven't been through yet, but this is just another layer, and it hurts a lot. And emotionally, physically, here we are 2 days removed, and I'm still just not over it, Matt, to be quite honest with you.
Well, shock, I think, is the thing that probably a lot of people are dealing with. It almost feels in a way like grieving. And I know I don't say that to be dramatic, but I feel like a lot of people are grieving right now, and they're going through all of the different emotions, right? They're sad, they're upset, they're shocked. They can't believe that this is actually happening, because that's the relationship that this fan base and this community has with this organization. So I think that that's very natural for that to be what's occurring right now. And, you know, I don't think we intended on waiting a little bit to do this episode of the podcast, but it just kind of worked out with travel. You know, we both got back at such different times. We had so many responsibilities on Monday that we weren't able to do something quickly, but I'm almost happy it worked out this way, because I feel like we've had a little bit of time to kind of gather our thoughts and be a little bit more rational, as opposed to just so emotional. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, right? Because people should be emotional and they should care, but I do feel a little bit different than I felt even 24 hours ago.
Yeah, I wanted to get there too real quick to apologize to everybody for not getting you an episode up right away after the game. A lot of times we do that, but as Matt said, the game was at 6:30, and it literally right after the game, I'm traveling back with the team. We didn't get back till 3 a.m. The team landed. Matt's got a lot of post-game stuff to do for television. And then right away we had locker cleanout day on Monday, which isn't normally the case, obviously. Yeah. We'd rather not doing that. And I had my show on WGR Sports Radio 550, the Extra Point Show, which I host on Monday, and it was good and therapeutic, and a lot of, great calls came in from, callers and listeners who had a lot of questions. We're going to get to some of your questions a little bit later. I think the biggest question that I've received, just from a practical game standpoint, is about why they didn't do something different on the short yardage plays when they weren't working, and even the final play of the protection and what happened, which we can get to in a minute. But let's start with the short yardage. I did think that was a critical part of this game. It wasn't just the one that the Bills got stopped on 4th and 1, 13 minutes left. Obviously, there were a couple others. They had a tush push at the goal line. There were a couple 3rd down and shorts that they couldn't convert. It was just a tough day in short yardage, and the Chiefs had a real good plan. And I agree that at some point, maybe they should have pivoted to something other than the tush push. I also understand when the Bills say, that's our best play. It's been working all year. You got to get a yard. And I think you got to get a yard too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when you look at the play that was called short, that looked like on the replay it was probably a first down, you shouldn't even be in that situation. Nope. It shouldn't even be close. You should be able to get that yard with ease, and it shouldn't even be to a point where it could go either way. My one issue with this specifically, and I very much agree with you, and it would be hypocritical for me to say, well, they needed to change it up, because all week going into the game, I said, now is not the time to change who you are. But if it doesn't work, then you need to change who you are, and you need to figure something else out. And it felt like they kept trying to make the same thing work, and circumstances matter. Let's talk about the one that we were just referencing. They throw the ball to Dalton Kincaid. They don't have the guys out there that they would want to have out, but they're trying to get the play off quickly. But now there's no Reggie Gilliam behind him because he wasn't on the field. Dalton Kincaid's out there. Yep. Curtis Samuel's out there. So like players who are not usually out there, you don't have an extra offensive lineman in. So I understand like trying to play with pace and trying to get it off quickly, but it also kind of came back and bit them because they didn't have their normal personnel and it just did not work for them. So it's a kind of a theme of the entire reason they lost. Things that they did so well all season, they did not do well. They did fine. But against this opponent, you can't be fine. You have to be great in order to win. And they did not play a great game on either side of the ball.
I'd have to go back and look. My guess is the reason they didn't change is they didn't want the Chiefs to change. Maybe they saw the Chiefs had their certain personnel, but that's exactly why. But you're right. It also, by the way, if you do change personnel and you take your time, there's a chance, I doubt it happens, but there is a chance that replay assist overturns the previous spot on the 3rd down because the official thought Dalton Kincaid's knee hit. It didn't. He should have had the first down. He gained the line, And maybe that's extra time for either replay assist or Sean McDermott to even challenge the spot. I don't think any of those things would have happened, but you never know how things play out if you give it a little bit more time. Speaking of Dalton Kincaid, let's go to the final play. Yep. Okay, so let's kind of start off in totality here from the beginning. A lot's been made about the Bills just not picking up the blitz, and they did not, of course. I mean, you have Osiris Torrance turning like, oh my God, like the blitzer's going right by him. On Monday, very, very real, like honest conversation with Osiris Torrance that I appreciate, that he gave us insight into what happened. He said, when the Chiefs show blitz on one side, they generally come from the other. They were showing the offensive right where he is. So the Bills slid protection to the left because that's kind of their MO. That's what they do. Josh said after the game on his first cadence, which is what that means is everybody, when he's going hut, 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 to see what the other team does. When he did that, he looked, they didn't back off. They were where they were. He's like, okay, they kind of had it in their head. They're blitzing from the left. We're good here. We don't need to change anything. Of course, that's not what happened. Give credit to Steve Spagnuolo. I'm still having people wondering why they didn't do this, why they didn't do that. I got RG3 out here telling me how Josh still could have changed the protection and all these people changing protection. Look, they screwed it up, right? They didn't have the right protection on. I get that. But the answer I understand, which is Josh said, I gave a first cadence. They didn't move. So we see this here. Now we think this is where they're coming from. They slide that way. They got beat. It was a better call by Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs.
They got outcoached. It was one instance where they got outcoached. And there's a lot of different people that this falls on because, of course, this has been the national narrative, or at least one of the national narratives for the last couple of days. I don't love the hit Shakir in the flat thing. I don't think that it's as easy as if you hit Shakir in the flat, then it's an easy first down, because I don't know if that's the case. But
also, I don't think Josh could turn that quickly to hit him.
Well, that's what I mean. He's got two guys running at him. And Warren Sharp posted the play yesterday for the angle, specifically kind of showing the drop from Kincaid. And it was like, hey, cover your eyes, Bills fans. And the thing that I keep going back to is it almost feels like that play is the perfect microcosm of the entire season, where something went wrong. Your quarterback was spectacular and able to get you out of it, make an unbelievable play, and then it still comes up short and isn't enough. So to me, it is very simply, there's a lot that goes into the play. Josh Allen somehow hit Dalton Kincaid in the hands. It needs to be caught. He's a first-round pick. He was a player who was drafted because he is so reliable as a pass catcher. You know, he's a weapon offensively. Hey, he's not a tight end. He's a weapon offensively. Hit him in his hands. Josh made an amazing play after the entire offense screwed up with not recognizing what was going on. And that's probably why we're having this podcast today. I really do think, at the very least, it's probably going overtime. There's about a minute 40 on the clock. If they catch that ball, they're not going to take a timeout there. If they catch that ball, they're going to be at the 34-yard line. There's about a minute 40 left on the clock. At that point, I think they would have gotten into a game of chicken, because I don't think they would have wanted to give the ball back to the Chiefs. So I think they would have probably run the ball a couple times just to see what happens, get themselves in a more favorable field goal position. And then at that point, imagine the Chiefs take their timeouts, and then the Bills probably have a play to convert on third down. If they get that, then obviously they're trying to go for the win. So there's a lot that we can talk about with that final play. They got out-coached, and somebody needs to be, blamed for that. I don't know if that's the line, if making a mistake. I don't know if Joe Brady's not putting it on their radar. I don't know if Cromer's not putting it on their radar beforehand, or if Spags just gets the win. And maybe it's that. Maybe he just gets the win. But at the end of the day, like, Josh got a throw off on a play that probably nobody else in the league is able to get a throw off, and hit his first round tight end in the hands. And it still didn't work.
It wasn't the easiest catch, but it has to be made. I agree. It wasn't the easiest. It was coming towards me right on the same angle. And I will tell you, when the ball was lofted, I saw, oh my God, there's Dalton Kincaid. He was moving this way and then had to suddenly stop in the other way.
Yep. And I don't want to blame this on, I feel I don't want to put it on one person, because it's not on one person, right? There's a lot of different things that can happen in a game. This is not the Mark Andrews drop. This is not oh my gosh, that's an easy catch. It's not that. Every other player on that team makes the catch. Every other player on the Bills roster would have been able to adjust with this pace that he was going at, stop and turn around and make the catch.
Maybe. I don't know, but he didn't make it, right?
I know.
That's a big assumption, but I don't know. I would say too that, I know this sounds weird, Eric Wood talked a lot of it, so I know I'm not crazy when I say this. This is not like excuse making. It's not at all. The field was very hard. I think the short yardage with Josh and that play mattered on the field being so hard. Like trying to get your footing and turn a little bit. Like even Josh on the short yardage stuff. It just seemed like there was no like. I'm not saying like on skates, right? But it's a lot harder when the field is that hard. And I do think that mattered to that play, and it also mattered to
probably
some of the short yardage.
And I'll say this too, and I don't want to I'm not trying to pile on or anything like that, because obviously it is a harder catch to make, but there's so many different things that I can look to with the offense and go, well, you wouldn't have even been in that position if this. Like even the plays on the earlier drive. I know a big talking point for the next several months is probably going to be, where was James Cook at the end of the game? He was so effective. I think it's a little bit of game script, but I also think it's just a little bit of the Bills trying to do what they did all year and not budging. Having Ty Johnson out there, giving James Cook a couple plays off on third downs, having Ty Johnson on the field. So it's just
my guess is, and we haven't heard from Joe Brady, my guess is they wanted Ty out there for pass protection because he's so much better. And maybe even have the Chiefs think he's there for pass protection, then he can still leak out. That's my guess. But man, you had a lot of time. You didn't have to rush everything. Just seemed like things were rushed a little bit the whole game, to be honest.
Well, that last drive, I'm pretty sure they passed on first down on their first play, incomplete pass. And then after Josh scrambled for the first down, then I believe they passed again on first down, also for an incomplete pass. So now you're playing behind the sticks. So, I'm always I never want to see you hand it off on second.
No, it wasn't a pass. It was a -1 sweep on first down to start the drive.
To Ty Johnson?
Ty Johnson had a toss sweep that went for negative yards, and then Josh scrambled for 13.
Well, there you go.
Is what happened.
So the first play, so negative Ty Johnson 1 yard, then Josh runs. Then I think on the next one, I think Josh is trying to hit Shakir kind of up the seam, and it almost looked like for a second it was going to be intercepted. Almost looked like a little bit of a throwaway, but it looked like there was some miscommunication there. And then you're playing behind the sticks. I would have not loved a 2nd and 10 run to James Cook, even though I know it's 4 down territory there. But at the same time, I would have probably wanted to see him out on the field. He was averaging between his rushes and passes or catches like 8-something yards a carry or 8.5 yards a touch or something in that game.
Yeah. I thought that they should have gone to James Cook earlier in the game. I don't know why James Cook only had 4 carries in the first half.
Because they were chasing the whole first half, basically, until they scored the Matt Collins touchdown at the end. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying.
They didn't have to chase, though. That's a point. James Cook has been really good. I will tell you that Connor McGovern after the game said it took him a while to figure out what was working. Duo was working, a certain, type of blocking up front. But only 4 carries in the first half for James Cook. To me, that's just I don't know. You could have controlled the game a little bit more instead of coming right out. Josh with the run, 2 passes by Josh that hit the other team in the hands. You know what I mean? So there's a lot there. Is
this loss to you more about the offense or the defense?
It's a great question. I don't know. And I pointed out yesterday, I don't know why it has to be more about one or the other. I don't know why, because I think both share responsibility, because I think the offense, they did score 29 points against a team that gives up 19 a game, right? Despite their struggles. The defense, they were not good in the first half. They didn't force a punt through 6 quarters of play. They didn't force a punt between the Ravens and the Chiefs. And they did get a turnover there to help them out, but then they made some adjustments and they gave the ball back. The Bills had the lead with the ball. Am I going to blame the defense for that? If they have the lead with the ball in the fourth quarter? No, but I can tell you the defense had plenty of chances to make plays where they didn't make plays or should have gotten more stops than they did. There's no doubt about that too. There's a lot there on the defense. I think a big part of this game was Kyrie Elam having to come into this game as well. And he was absolutely victimized.
Yes, they took advantage of him. That was one of the biggest moments in the game. And, it's just scary from a human standpoint about watching Christian Benford kind of just get hit and almost just tense up, and his teammates and trainers almost holding him up. It's scary to see that happen. So that was scary. And then they brought in Kyrie Elam. They can't play zone defense with Kyrie Elam. It just does not work. And Mahomes picked him apart, especially on that second drive that he was in. They just went down the field so methodically against him. And that was a huge difference in the game. I'm not saying if Christian Benford doesn't get hurt, they win the game. But I think their defense plays a heck of a lot better in certain situations with him on the field. and Kyer Elam not on the field. And I say the same thing about Taylor Rapp, although I don't really ever remember noticing Cole Bishop being out of place or making like a crucial mistake in this game.
No, I agree with you. It wasn't a mistake, but man, if he holds on to the interception, it's a different scenario too. The one where it was reviewed, and I don't know. What did you think about that review?
That it was inconclusive, but it shouldn't have been called a catch so quickly on the field. Yeah. I think that it should have been called incomplete, and then you could make the argument either way. The only issue that I had was that the Bills took a defensive holding on that play anyway. It would have still been an automatic first down for the Chiefs, but obviously the Bills wanted to push them back a little bit, but it cost them a timeout, and it also took a little bit of time off, or, it gave yourself the chance of having the ball back in your hands with more time on the clock, which I did not think was a bad thing. So eventually the inevitable happens. At that point, it's 14-10. The Chiefs score, make it 21-10, and then the Bills respond with the So it ended up not really making a huge difference, but yeah, no, for sure. I mean, maybe you force a field goal there, and then all of a sudden you score, and then it's a tie game going into half instead of a 5-point deficit. I don't have a major issue with that, but I do have an issue with the stupid blended clock nonsense that doesn't make sense.
Okay, well, I get it, but I will tell you blended because I think it's because there's just no tenths of a second on the NFL clocks. If you think about it in hockey terms, it actually there is zero. There's a whole second after it hits zero, and I think because there was less than a second between the play clock and the game clock, it works out. I understand.
If the game clock is done before the 2-minute warning, you should have to run a play. I understand it's fractional, but the clock hits zero.
Yeah,
clearly. So it's just, it's a stupid rule that, I mean, kind of cost the Bills a little bit. Once again, these are not reasons they lost. I hate the blame the officials nonsense, but they're just kind of little layers along the way of you need things to go right against this team to win, and they didn't play their best game, and they didn't have things go right.
Okay, so let's go back to the defense a little bit. One thing we also heard from Greg Rousseau, and we've seen some breakdowns from Dan Orlovsky and others. Here we go again. Chiefs did something they didn't do all year, and the Bills weren't ready for it, and it's just tough to accept. And they were ready for these certain plays that they had in the bag. They've been waiting on, whether they were saving it for the Bills, saving it for the AFC Championship, just saw something on film, whatever it was. The Bills just weren't prepared for a couple of guys pulling left, Patrick Mahomes reversing out and going right. Patrick Mahomes on designed runs, not scrambles, beating them. I thought the edge defenders were not good for the Bills in this game, and that has been too much of a theme over the last several years in the playoffs. And of course, because of that, Sean McDermott gets a lot of heat that his defense, once again, was not good enough in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that it's warranted. What I was doing right now, I don't know if you're watching this on the video, you're going to see me kind of scribbling down some notes. These are the games that they have been eliminated in the playoffs since 2019 with Josh Allen as the starter, how many points they have allowed. 22 to the Texans, 38 to the Chiefs, 42 to the Chiefs, 27 to the Bengals, and then last year, 27 to the Chiefs, and then this year, 32. So I was going to try and do the quick math, see what that averages out to. But, I mean, they're giving up basically 30-something points a game when their season comes to an end. And offensively, they're scoring in the high 20s. So vice versa here. You're scoring in the high 20s. You should be giving yourself a chance in all of these games, and they have lost every single one of them. These are the games that they're getting eliminated in. I'm of the belief that if you have a defensive-minded head coach, in the biggest moments, your defense needs to show up, and they continuously do not show up. I am not saying this is on Sean McDermott. I think Sean McDermott actually collectively this year maybe had his most impressive year as the Bills head coach, but the defense clearly needs a revamp. It is not good enough. Their defensive line gets taken advantage of. They do not have enough difference makers on that side of the ball, and they have a lot of things that they need to figure out. A lot of the big name potential extensions we're going to talk about this offseason are on that side of the ball, and I have major questions on almost all of them.
Okay, speaking of questions, you want to get to that, or do you want to do anything else here? What do you got left on the I mean, we've dissected this, been 48 hours, but we can keep going if you want.
Is there anything else specifically from the game that you want to, that you take away and just like, hey, this is standing out to me, or like, where do they, a lot of the questions are going to be more forward thinking. So is there anything else you want to say about kind of the season as we put a bow on it, or just start immediately going forward?
I don't know. I don't know if I can anymore, to be honest with you.
I'm already ready to talk about the schedule, to be honest.
Yeah, listen, I will tell you that, one thing that's bothered me, and this unfortunately happens in all these situations.
Mhm.
It happened last week with Mark Andrews. We've seen it with college players. I've been told that not all Bills Mafia, let's say, is the same, and the way that they're treating Dalton Kincaid and his family, and that
Oh,
bothers
really?
me. That bothers me a lot.
Really?
Yes,
I'm a little surprised by that. Not that
I'm
it
not,
bothers.
because this
Not
is
that.
what happens with people. Some people are just terrible.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. Please do not do that. People, some people, I think, genuinely are good. Most people, but you can sometimes people are just the worst. So I really hope that doesn't get to him. And I know I was just critical of him because I'm trying to be critical as
Yeah, well, you're allowed to be critical of them.
but not as a person. Like,
Correct.
people make
Of the
mistakes.
play, yeah.
He was playing with 2 bad knees. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was out there trying to help his team, and it obviously didn't work out. I'm not saying Dalton Kincaid's not going to be a good football player in this league. I think he's going to be. I feel the same way about the Mark Andrews stuff from last week. It's just unfortunate in a play like that, you need somebody to step up. And I think this really speaks to just the Bills in general about, they just don't have enough talent on their either sides of the ball to compete with the best teams in the league or beat the best teams in the league. They can compete with them, but maybe that's the difference between getting over the hump. I mean, look at the last several first-round picks. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
Mm-hmm.
Be cool. Like, don't be a bad person about any of this stuff. That would be stupid.
Unfortunately, that is the case with some. All right. Let's get some questions. We did throw them out there. You can tweet us at Sal Sports, at Matt_Bove. Let's get to The Truth DT. I don't know if you know, but The Truth DT has like 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, 255,000 subscribers on Twitter/X, and yet listens to our show, watches our show.
That's
and
amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So we appreciate it, The Truth DT. And really a just simple question. What is the team's biggest need going into the offseason? I could go in 4 different places. You can do whatever you want here. I could say certainly you could always use a premier pass rusher, right? I mean, like, if you can get your hands on one, they still need more in the pass rush area. They need more at defensive tackle to help stop the run. They could do that. I do think they need something on the boundary. They don't have enough. Christian Benford is a nice player. He's a solid player. He's coming back. If they want to resign Russell Douglas, I still don't know from what I saw this year if that's going to happen or a great idea. And then what we saw from Kyrie Elam come in wasn't enough last year. I wouldn't be comfortable as I sit here with Jamarcus Ingram being the opposite starter to Christian Benford. And then I would also say that you still need to add to, in some capacity, at wide receiver, that there just wasn't a playmaker available to make a play late in the game.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big 3 things that they need are, in corner is a sneaky need, because I don't know what they're going to do with Rasul Douglas. I feel like he might be the guy that they decide not to extend. Or I'll say he's very, very close with Christian Benford. So I could see them trying to sign him to a shorter contract, try and figure out the future and run it back with these 2 guys as their corners next season. So that's a sneaky need for them. I think they need a big run stuffing defensive tackle, but I don't think that needs to be something you use for like a premium asset on. If that's the case, sure. They need a pass rusher and they need a wide receiver. They desperately need we're going to have the same conversation that we had last year. It's going to be a little kind of less insane because, there's not a Stephon Diggs trade and they're coming off of this team, whatever. But I think you like Shakir. I think you bring back Hollins for sure. I think Samuel's contract brings him back, even though he's probably not going to be like a focal point. And then after that, you have Coleman. But none of those guys are shying me away from trying to go out and get a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Everybody eats makes sense in theory, but there were times in this season and specifically in the last game where they needed a guy to just go win, and they did not have that player.
Okay. Here's one that says, well, we got a couple here that I'll just kind of let you talk about. All right. Because these are more like frustrated, like emotional fans, but
sure,
I just want to address
as they should be.
Well, okay, then how about this one? At NFL Bills Wizard, how much longer will we have to put up with being a McDermott?
A while, because I know that that's going to be something that people talk about. Here is my spin-off of that comment.
Okay, wait, and the second part of that is from the Bobbert. How many times has McDermott and his staff to be outcoached by Andy Reid and his staff in the postseason before the team makes a change? 4 times doesn't seem like enough. Maybe 5 times? See, these are sarcastic comments of people who just have been waiting in the weeds to tell you how bad Sean McDermott has been.
There's validity to these criticisms. I don't want to like completely brush them off. I think Sean McDermott did a very good job this year and grew as a coach. He had 2 first year off, for Joe Brady, his second go around, but his first full season, as the Bills offensive coordinator, for Bobby Babich, his first year as a defensive coordinator. I think collectively they did a pretty good job. Sean McDermott, the coaching staff, they deserve some of the criticism for what happened in the game against the Chiefs, but I don't think it all goes there. I also think that it's time we have a serious conversation about the Buffalo Bills front office and their inconsistent ability to hit on early draft picks. And this has been a problem for them for the last 5 years. Look at the other team that they just lost to and look at the contributions they got from their high-end draft picks. Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, all of these guys who have made an impact. The Bills' last 3 top picks were Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, and Kaiir Elam. Kaiir Elam hurt them in this game from when he stepped onto the field. He got a little bit better as the game went on, but certainly has not lived up to the expectations of a first-round pick. Dalton Kincaid, we've already talked about. Keon Coleman had 1 catch in this game. That is not good enough. And then even if you extend it into the day 2s, then you've got a couple hits in there, but you've also got some misses, right? You're talking about guys like Cody Ford, who they drafted, and Boogie Basham, who they drafted, and like these players who just never really worked out. They need to hit on their early draft picks. They have been very good on hitting on their mid picks. I think Brandon Beane is very good at his job, but they need to draft better in order to beat these teams.
Okay. So I'm going to say that I just think every team has the same rate of hit and miss. You bring up the Kansas City Chiefs. Xavier Worthy was good in this game. He wasn't spectacular this year, but how about this? Who was their first round pick a year ago? Felix Anaduke Uzoma. Where's he? Who was their first round pick the year before Trent McDuffie? Well, okay, sorry, Nick Bolton was good. The year before that, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who busted out after drafting him, winning a Super Bowl. You could do this all day with every team, Matt.
Not with first round picks, you shouldn't. And I get their later picks, so it's more of a crapshoot. These are guys they traded up for. They traded up for Kaiir Elam. They traded up for Dalton Kincaid.
Okay, but I'm saying you're using them like every team hits. You're right. They have to. Every team can say that. You got to have there's no 100% hit rate. I agree. I'd love to see more. That was so far. Here's my biggest thing about Dalton Kincaid. I think he's a really good player. We were told he's going to be this mismatch. You're going to use him. My thing is usage, and there was no chemistry this year with him and Josh. I don't know if the injury happened or whatever.
I think it's a lot of injury stuff, honestly. I really do think it is.
So I don't know. And I just, Xavier Worthy is a nice player. He made some plays in this game. All year they were like, wow, what's going on with Xavier Worthy? And come on, you heard that. Why can't he get involved more? Why are they not on the same page? Like, we're going to suddenly make Xavier Worthy a Hall of Fame first-round pick after having one good game or a couple of good games at the end of the year?
Kincaid and Coleman combined for 8 targets for 3 catches.
I know.
Xavier Worthy led the game in receiving. So I understand. Xavier Worthy had 7 targets, 6 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. No Bills receiver besides Mac. I mean, it's a huge problem that Mac Hollins is leading your team.
So do you think they don't?
Championship.
Yes, but do you think it's because those players aren't good enough players that you mentioned for the Bills, or they're not using them enough, or don't have a good enough plan, or aren't incorporating them early enough, or it could be a lot of things?
It's everything. Right. It's a little bit of everything. I mean, it is all dependent. I think with Dalton Kincaid, it's probably a little bit of, hey, he was really banged up. I think with Keon Coleman, he's not the type of receiver they've had. I also think he's been a little banged up from coming back, and he just didn't get into this game. Obviously, Kaiir Elam, we've talked about a lot over the course of the years. And then Greg Rousseau is a good player. Eventually, he needs to show up in a big game. Like, they're going to talk this offseason about extending Greg Rousseau for big-time money, and I don't think I'm there yet. And that's another first-round pick. Greg Rousseau is a good first-round pick, but that needs to be the bar. Like, Ed Oliver is a good player. Josh is elite. They hit a grand slam on Josh Allen, completely changed the course of the franchise. But since then, there has been things to be desired with their early drafting, and that is why I am absolutely okay with the idea of them moving on from a first-round pick or multiple first-round picks to go get a proven playmaker. Because I don't even know if they're going to hit on the first-round pick anyway. If you go get Max Crosby, if you go get Myles Garrett, you know what you're getting. You know you're getting a game changer.
Agreed. I just think that's the same for any team. I mean, I think it's a crapshoot almost. Like you can go through it.
But we're not talking about any team. We're talking about a team that was 3 points away from going to
Mhm.
the Super Bowl. You need to be held to a higher standard if you are trying to win it all. So when you say, yeah, the hit rate is like this around the league, we are not comparing this team to around the league. We are comparing this team
You
to the
think that
team.
Brandon Beane should be told? You think the standard has to be he needs to hit on more people just because he's a Buffalo Bills GM and they're better? Well, then why aren't you looking? Well, I mean, again, they won Super Bowls, the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll go through it. This year, second round pick couldn't even see the field. To Wanye Morris, early pick couple years ago, got benched basically. Sky Moore's been terrible for them. Matt, every team is like this.
Every team is like this, but I understand that. They have done a better job. If you look at the Chiefs picks and the Bills picks, the Chiefs have drafted better. You are comparing yourself to those teams. You are not comparing yourself to the teams that are the bottom feeders. And I understand, like, it's harsh. It's the reality, but it might be the difference. What else would be, right? We have to start looking at, like, why is this team not getting over the hump? Is it coaching? It's validity. Is it players? There's validity there. But the front office deserves some of the blame here too. Some of the blame.
I don't disagree. I just think that the blame of comparing hit rates on draft picks is not the way I want to go, because I just think this is what happens in the draft. You'd love for every draft pick to hit. Sometimes they're not. I mean, I think that maybe how you structured the team we all had concerns about wide receiver, right? To me, that's more of this criticism. Like how you spread the money around, who you give it to, who you pay, who you don't, and what your philosophy was coming into the year. They needed a wide receiver. We all said it. They needed more speed. Maybe we can revisit whether or not they should trade with Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe they should have drafted Xavier Worthy themselves instead of the conversation being should they have not traded with Kansas City because you don't trade with your rivals. Maybe you should have valued Xavier Worthy, a guy like that with all that speed, because look at when you play the Kansas City Chiefs, how much it was needed.
There's blame to go around. Like, I feel like maybe you are thinking that I am putting the blame for all of the failures on the front office. I'm not. I think the front office is very solid. I am a big fan is not the right word. I think Brandon Beane is good at his job, but the draft picks have not been good consistently. And I get it. I understand that it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but they put a lot of freaking time, money, and resources into the draft, and it has left a lot to be desired these last several years. Like you could say the same thing. Hey, should they have drafted Xavier Worthy? Should they have drafted Ladd McConkey? Should they have drafted A.D. Mitchell? I don't know. These are guys who did just as much, if not more. I mean, obviously, Ladd McConkey did too. There's a lot there.
Okay. Good discussion. Let's go to Redhead Sports. What do you view as the Bills' most drastic change coming in the offseason? Well, it could very well be a coordinator getting replaced if the Bills decide that Matthew Smiley, they need to move on from him.
Yeah,
that would be a drastic change, I would think.
That's the one that I never want to. I'm never rooting for somebody to lose their job. I'm never going to say someone should lose their job as a just mean thing to say. I won't be surprised if that happens. That's the way I'll put it. They have had special teams blunders along the way for several years, and I think that's probably going to be the outcome here.
Samuel Williams asks about extension candidates. Actually, the Bills are in a very good spot as far as there's not a lot of guys who are scheduled to be unrestricted free agents who are really critical to the team. Ty Johnson, to me, might be the most. Ty Johnson, Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper, DeJuan Smoot, probably the guys you're looking at are in Reed Ferguson, just from name and being the tenure. But there are extension candidates, if you want to go that route. Going into their fourth year, the guys who you can extend now would be Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Terrell Bernard. Those are guys you probably are looking at now. If you want to extend them out, now you can do that because they're after their third year, and that's how the CBA works. You have to wait until after the third year is complete.
Give me your list of guys. So let's put these all into a bucket here. So it's Khalil, it's James Cook, it's Terrell Bernard, it's Christian Benford, it's Greg
and it's Greg Rousseau. Yep, sorry, he's going to his fifth year.
So fifth year. So I'm going to put all those five guys in a bucket. Give me the guy you feel the most confident will get an extension, and give me the guy the least confident you think will get an extension.
So give me the names again.
So Shakir, it's Rousseau, Shakir, Bernard, Cook, and
you mentioned somebody else.
Benford.
Most confident. I don't know, but I'm not saying any of them will happen this offseason.
Well,
right?
Rousseau would be the one that would be the most. I mean, he's going
Because
into a
of
smithier
the way, yeah. So maybe that would be it because of the way the money works. You'd have there's a lot there that you could move around. So that might be it. I think Khalil Shakir is probably the easiest to get done. That's
I
what I'll
agree.
say. Okay, I think he's the easiest to get done. I think they would want to get Benford and Bernard as quickly as they can, or at some point at least. I think they would be the more on the priority list, whether timeline or not on the priority list. I think the toughest to get done is going to be James Cook.
I agree. I think that James Cook will be the toughest to get done because, I mean, his brother Dalvin is now basically acting like his agent on social media and saying that it's time for $20 million a year. The Bills can't be built that way. I think James Cook's a really good player, but I don't think that this needs to be a team that's giving $20 million a year to a running back. I just don't think that that's the way you win in this NFL. I know, like, look what Saquon's doing. Look what Derrick Henry's doing. Isn't it funny that those are guys almost on, like, bargain, relatively speaking, contracts in the second half of their careers. So I don't know. I really like James Cook, but I do think that that's probably going to be the most difficult one to get done. But I really do have reservations about a Greg Rousseau extension. I think Greg Rousseau's a really good player, but I think he's going to get paid like one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And I don't think I'm willing to commit that much money if I'm the front office to him. Is that crazy? Am I wrong? You can tell me if I'm wrong.
That you think he'll get paid a lot of money, but you wouldn't do it through the Bills.
Well, I think it's a little bit like Tremaine Edmonds. He's a really young.
I understand.
He's a really young
totally
player. Somebody will be like, "Wow, look at this guy. He's great against the run. He's good. He can take over games." It's just my thing is.
But I do think that it might be easier to get him done, considering he's scheduled to make close to $13 million on the fifth-year option, and they can just lower that and say, "We'll give you more money later."
Yeah, that's why I'm almost anticipating it's going to happen, but I'm going to be really concerned if going into next year, their pass rushers are Greg Rousseau and another guy. If it's Greg Rousseau and Max Crosby, yeah, I really like the Bills' ability to get after the quarterback. But if it's Greg Rousseau and Epinesa or Smoot or some other guy that's like that caliber of player, I'm still really not going to be confident in the defensive line if they just run it back with Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and then some other guy as their other starter in their base defense. I'm just not going to feel confident about that group.
Okay. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of questions that I don't even want to answer. They're just people being angry and more accusatory than they are questions, right? Why, Mark Jevy, why does Josh hold on to the ball so long? And don't say no one is open because that's BS. Well, I don't know. If you're going to answer your own question, I don't know why we're going to answer it. But I will tell you part of it is because the Bills don't have separators at wide receiver.
Yeah.
He says the difference between Josh and Mahomes, the ball is out fast with Mahomes. It seems like Josh is always ad-libbing truth or thoughts. Josh ad-libs a lot. So does Patrick Mahomes, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the difference between one of my takeaways from this game, and it's ridiculous, and I'm not trying to like beat a dead horse here. I don't know how you could watch this game, the AFC Championship, and not think that Josh Allen is the most valuable player of the league because there aren't people open a lot. Look what he has to make happen. He's throwing touchdowns to Mac Hollins on McDuffie with no separation, and they're having success doing it. Like, that's one of the biggest differences between him and the other elite players or other elite quarterbacks in the league. Mahomes is a different player in the playoffs. He's the best player in the league, and it's not even close. But when we're comparing Josh to guys like Lamar and like Burrow and everything, dude, Joe Burrow can throw like 3-yard screen passes to Jamar Chase that turn into 65-yard touchdowns. Like, look at how elite those players are. I'm not saying Burrow isn't good or Lamar isn't good. I'm just saying, like, it's time for Josh Allen to get a couple dudes. They need guys on that offense because other teams, you know how other teams scheme against the Bills? They're like, hey, we're going to try and take Khalil Shakir out of the game. That's a problem if Khalil Shakir is the one that needs to be taken out of a game. That is not a good enough group. Everybody can eat, but there can be people who have like entrees and then other people who have appetizers.
I'm okay with them re-signing Mac Hollins. They have to do more than that, though.
Oh, for
sure. I do think he was a nice player for them.
I think their wide receiver room next year should be Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, just because the money doesn't really make a ton of sense to move on from him. And then two people who they go out and get, whether that's a premium pick in the draft or whether that's a decently sized free agent or a trade. I think those need to be their wide receivers next year. And I think Mac Hollins should be your, kind of like what you thought going into this year he would be. He can be the same role, but, I don't know if I want him out as the guy on the field on like third down, gotta have it plays.
Okay, last one from me, and then we'll get on out of here because I think that it's a great way to stop. And I got to get who actually asked the question. I'm sorry, but he asks, what are reasons to be optimistic going forward? And I think that's the number one thing is, of course, Josh Allen, right? You have Josh Allen on your team.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, it's Josh Allen, but Josh Allen, they're probably have. He's going to be 29 next season. What do you think they have? Josh is going to get an extension this offseason. They're going to pay Josh a bajillion dollars to extend him, to give themselves more short-term cap room, and also compensate him like a top player in the NFL. And that makes a ton of sense. Josh Allen's 29. How many more years does he have in his quote prime? 4? Is that the number you'd say?
4 to 5, maybe, depending on how. 4 to 5.
Yeah. So you still have that guy for another 4 to 5 years in his prime, and we'll see how he adjusts. He's an elite passer of the football. He's probably going to get less mobile over time, but that's still okay. I like James Cook a lot. I like Shakir a lot. I like some of the young playmakers they have on their defense. I know Benford is still young. Bernard is still young. Ed Oliver, I still think, is a good player. I still think they've got some talent that they can build around, but I do feel like they need kind of an overhaul is a little bit too strong, but I'm willing to blow it up a little bit more than they have in years past. Like last year, they did a lot. I think it's got to be at least as much going into next season.
They're in a better position now than they were a year ago as far as cap and things like that.
For sure.
There's going to be some adjustments, but that's why they did all the things they did last year. I'll give you one more reason to be optimistic next year. This offensive line's coming back all intact. Everybody's under contract. They've been very good this year, and that will help them obviously going forward.
I believe last year when we were doing this episode of the podcast last year, because unfortunately this has become a regular occurrence, they were going into the season with like negative $40 million in salary cap space. I think they're pretty much even right now.
I think it's negative. Someone tweeted me negative 17, maybe. I
don't think that's right.
Okay.
I don't think that's right.
I haven't looked completely, but yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to have some money to spend. This is not going to be Patriots. You've got $100 million that you can go spend, but I do think that they will be able to do more things than they were able to do last year. Like last year, what was the biggest move that they made? Was it Curtis Samuel?
Well, I think that was the releases they made. Those were the
moves. I mean like additions. Like who was the biggest addition?
I think financially, probably, yeah.
Right. That's what I mean. So like, I feel like they've got a couple things up their sleeve, and I also think that now is the time to go for it because of the comment I made about Josh. This year did feel a little bit like a reset year, but if you want to go do a move like a Max Crosby or like a Myles Garrett, and it's going to cost you a ton, now is the time to do it while you still have your quarterback in your prime because you are trying to win now. It's like doing the Von Miller move just 3 years later with a younger, different version of Von Miller.
So depending on where you look, Spot Track has the Bills about $2.5 million over the cap, and they're top 51, and over the cap has them at about $7 million over the cap.
So split the difference. They're probably around 5. Yeah, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
They're in a decent financial spot moving forward. They had a lot of stuff. I won't tell you who, but I had a front office member tell me like we had a lot of stuff that needed to be fixed, and we feel really good about what we did.
Okay, well that's obviously something encouraging and optimistic. We'll be back after we hear from Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, and we'll talk to everybody, and we'll get into it a little bit more, and what lies ahead this offseason.
It sucks now. I'm not saying it doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
They exceeded expectations this year.
I know that's what's crazy. No matter, even though that's said, it's still terrible.
Oh, it's empty.
I know.
It's empty. It's going to be in 3 months when you look back on the season. I feel like there was a lot of really fun moments in the season. I mean, Josh Allen might win the MVP, probably not. Might win the MVP, should win the MVP. They beat the Chiefs in the regular season. They beat the Lions in the regular season. They had all these great games. They had all these comeback games that they had. They start the season with a first half dud against the Cardinals and just absolutely go off. They were fantastic in their division again. Like there's a lot of reasons to be really, really excited about the future of this team. And the season was really, really fun. It's just, you get so close and it makes it so much harder. They're 4 points away from a punch and a ticket to the Super Bowl. And sure. I think the hardest thing to probably swallow for people is they're good enough. They're a good enough team that they could be playing in that game or potentially winning that game.
They were 10 minutes away. They had the lead with 10 minutes left in the AFC Championship game. We'll talk to you after we hear from Brandon Bean and Sean McDermott later in the week. In the meantime, of course, thanks a lot to everybody for following, watching us all season long. But hey, a new offseason and season is going to be upon us very soon here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Wherever you find us on your podcast platforms, we're right there for you all the time. Download, subscribe, throw us a nice review and a like. And of course, Sal Sports on the YouTube channel where you can watch us as well. For our producer, Mike Robier, we'll talk to you next time. It's Always Game Day in Buffalo.